G'day, ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today, I thought we might not necessarily have a look at a tank as such, although you do see the Challenger 2 on your screen right now. I thought we'd have a look at an entire lineup and see roughly how it fits the meta. So, for those of you who still haven't guessed it, today we're going to have a look at the British top tier tanks lineup. This lineup consists of the Challenger 2, Challenger 1 Mark III, Stormer HVM, Hunter F6, Seahawk FGA6, and the Warrior. Now, one thing that I will get to in a little bit later is the fact that I don't have the Marksman in the lineup as well, and I'll explain later. But for now, we're going to have a look at the Challenger 2 and how it performs in the meta of top tier. I'm not really interested in its raw performance. I'm interested in how it generally fits the gameplay style. Now, in War Thunder, you have a couple of game modes. You have Domination, which is this one right now that you see on your screen. You have Battle, which is 2 caps. Each team gets a home cap. And you have single cap. Now, for this tank to perform in its best scenarios, I would say, it actually, for me, performs best on domination maps. You can see here, I've taken a sort of semi-forward spot on the map, and I'm basically holding it and trying to prevent people from flanking the cap B, and hence taking cap C, which is Mozdok in a nutshell. Essentially, if you take B, and if you take that flank, you have easy access to the C cap. And so what I'm doing here, along with this M1 Abrams, is trying to hold that. Now, the M1 has done a larger flank than me, and basically this is because I don't want to expose my tank by going over those ridge lines without the knowledge that there are no tanks to shoot at me. So I want to make sure that it's safe, and so I just don't do that. I can't afford to. This tank is just too slow. The Challenger 2 is perhaps the slowest of all the MBTs. It's very heavy. It has supposedly lots of armor, but for some reason it is outclassed by, I would say, several vehicles in the tech tree. The C1 Ariete, for example, and the Leopard 2A5. Honestly, these tanks are extremely strong from what I can see and what I can tell, and from what people tell me. And from what I've played as well of the Leopard 2A5, I'm okay with the Leopard 2A5. I don't do terribly well, but in top tier I generally don't do terribly well anyway. Now, as you can see, the Challenger 2 does take a while to actually get to speed, and you can't use any speed advantage. You have none. You're a defensive tank. The tank is meant to get to a place, hold it, and basically hold it until it dies. This sort of works in the War Thunder meta, and I will say I actually really enjoy the Challenger 2 as a tank, despite it being a sort of non-meta tank. It's not as strong. I would say it's one of the weakest. Maybe the Leclerc could be in terms of its armor. Koala. Let's call it the AMX 56. Jokes aside, though, I've heard mixed emotions about the Leclerc, but I won't talk about that because, let's face it, I haven't touched it, so I don't know anything about it. The Challenger 2 needs a good team to function around it. And that is where the problem with the Challenger 2 lies. If it doesn't have a team that functions, it doesn't work, because the flanks around it simply fall away. And you'll see in this game, one of my flanks doesn't get secured. Obviously, it's my fault that I didn't secure it myself. But the fact of the matter is, as soon as you let someone get around you at all, and it's very, very easy in this meta where you have vehicles that exceed your both power to weight ratio, your speed, and in some cases, all three: speed, mobility, gun, and armor. And honestly, that does the Challenger a massive disservice. it's extremely vulnerable when it's open. It only has a few mils of armor on the side, and the lower front plate, the lower glacis, as you can see there, not only is huge, but it's a giant weak spot as well. Hull down, this thing is pretty capable, but it needs a hull down position, and not every map has that available. There are some maps that do, like even American Desert has a little bit, but there's nowhere really to make the most of the Challenger 2. It's very, very map dependent, and it's very situational. It's not a really well-rounded MBT. I mean, it's still fun. I still enjoy the tank. I think it's great. But it is very, very situational, and there are certain things that really, really hamper its performance. For example, the gun. It's a good gun, but against certain targets like the 2A5, whilst the 2A5 is easily the best MBT in the entire game, at least as of the last patch, it's very, very difficult to actually take out a hull down 2A5. Maybe you need to be using Hesh and get a lucky shot, but it's just not terribly feasible. And one of the things that the Leopard 2A5 does literally better than the Challenger 2 is almost everything. It has better armor all around, it has better gun, it has better mobility, and the Challenger 2 in that case pretty much just suffers. What I would suggest for the Challenger 2 to make it a, I would say more competitive top tier MBT is to perhaps give it a better shell. Now, as I understand, the Challenger 2 carried the L26A1 shell, which was the shell that it used in the Gulf War, if I'm not mistaken. That shell could perhaps be rather useful, and I think it would be a good complement to the tank, so it would actually have something against the others. Because it doesn't have mobility, it would have to make up for that in gun. And I think L26A1 would be reasonable. Anyway, moving on to the next vehicle, we have the HVM Stormer. Now, I'm going to skip this gameplay because it's boring, and I'll show you another one. Now, here I am in my Stormer. I spawned off first, and we're on Corellia. Now, Corellia has a bowl, basically. The combat happens in a bowl, or in a little basin, let's say. It has sheer cliffs on either side, and it's kind of decent for helicopters and for close air support. It shields it from the radar. Now, obviously, this isn't the ideal situation for the Stormer, but you can see what I'm talking about when I say that the Stormer is a little bit of a strange vehicle. I would say, personally, that the Stormer is more an AA system for helicopters. It's not for planes. It's certainly not for planes. The Dart does not have a proximity fuse. The radar seems to be unreliable, and the Dart doesn't follow your mouse cursor. It actually follows a sort of it trails the mouse cursor, and essentially what you have to do is start leading and compensating for that when you aim. And not only is it annoying, frustrating, but it also puts it at a massive disadvantage compared to the other SAM systems. You can see me here trying to get this MiG-17. I believe it's a MiG-17. Or a MiG-15. And I just can't. Between the smoke and the Dart not functioning properly, it's really, really frustrating. And it's extremely difficult to actually get it on target. Now, I don't know anyone else who has actually enjoyed playing the Stormer or being around the Stormer, and in fact, you can see here, the MiG-15 manages to actually get a rocket on me. Obviously, he doesn't damage anything critical, but that could have been a kill. And I had the radar lock, but no proximity fuse puts me at such a huge disadvantage, and it's just so frustrating to play. This thing is probably ideal for still helicopters, and honestly, that's not a terrible thing, but I would say bring the Marksman with you, because you're going to need it for planes. If there are planes up in the air, take the Marksman. If there are helicopters in the air, take the Stormer. Now, I don't understand why the Stormer has to be, so special. I understand that it has APDS, or APF SDS, But one of the weird things I found about the Stormer is that the APF SDS doesn't pen anything. It pens 50 mils. It's only good for about SPAA like Shilka, Gepard, Tunguska, little things like that, and they can just hit you back with a nice high explosive missile and fill you full of bullets before you can say boo. And that's one of the problems with the Stormer, is it's just too specialized. The British lineup is extremely specialized, and you require a few crew slots to actually get everything that you need. Maybe you have your heavy armor, your hull down support as the Challenger 2, but you don't have anything as a sort of general purpose MBT. You haven't got an all-rounder. The Americans get 3 Abrams, plus the XM1, plus the MBT-70, and the Sergeant York, the ADATs, the F-100, the AH-1Z. They have probably the most well-rounded lineup at the moment, considering that the ADATs is probably the best SPAA. One of the issues with the British lineup, of course being so specialized, is there are only so many vehicles that you can fit in a 5-crew slot. You don't have lots of options. You don't have a lot of opportunity to frag out as much as the other nations, and I find that that leaves the British at a severe disadvantage. You need to take multiple crew slots in your British vehicles. For example, Stormer and Marksman, which is, by the way, ugly as all hell. I would much rather... There's essentially a Chieftain hull, which has the Falcon's guns, and it looks much prettier. And it's not nearly as ugly, and the guns are a lot closer together. And I believe there's also a Marksman turret for the Vickers MBT, or the Centurion. Gaijin, why did you give us the ugliest one? I have no idea. But you know what? It's a radar SPA. I shouldn't really be complaining. It's sort of small things. Nonetheless, it's British, and we love it, but it's slightly strange. Now, as you can see, I'm still tracking this MiG-15. I'm still sort of tracking him through the trees, and he's coming in really nice and close. I honestly have no idea how I managed to get that kill. It was probably the luckiest kill that I've gotten, and it has pretty much only been the only plane kill that I've ever gotten in the Stormer. I find it really frustrating that this has to be the case. I wish it would just be like the others, you know. It's like the meme where the woman is screaming at her child in the back car, the back of the car, saying, "Why can't you be normal?" And the only one that's doing the autistic screeching is the British lineup, for some reason. Now, I did say that the Stormer was supposedly good against helicopters, and there are 2 of them flying really nice and close together. You can see that the radar is glitching because of the terrain, I guess. And it's actually a real struggle to get this on target. If I had a proximity fuse, it wouldn't be a problem, because I would just be able to point the gun or the launcher near the target and it would hit. But the radar being a little bit funny, collecting a bit of noise and glitching like that, tends to be frustrating if you have to hit the target point on. It's almost like having to use an ATGM all over again, but this one just gets a lot longer range and fires dart. Now, speaking of the dart, I honestly thought that a dart traveling at such a high speed would pen such a decent amount of armor. It should, from what I can see, and from my knowledge of APF-SDS being a kinetic round and all, and I believe this one is tungsten, although do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I feel like it should pen a lot more armor. It should be a little bit more, suited to the anti-tank purpose. At least maybe I can shoot a Leopard in the side, and it does some damage, or shoot an angled part of a lightly armored vehicle, and it doesn't ricochet. I think having little things like that where I can work around these little iniquities, little inequities, let's say, iniquity, sorry, rather. I would much rather have a situation where I can, make do with what I've got rather than just sit and cry in the back of the corner. I do think the Stormer is decent for its anti-helicopter role. I just feel like it's a little bit too specialized, and it doesn't really line up with the others. It's not nearly as good. So what we'll do now is we'll return back to the gameplay where our brave hero in the Stormer, myself, has decided, you know what, screw it, we're going to go cap point. And again, I spot something on my radar, And I'm looking for it. Where does it pop up? There is also a 2A4 in spawn that is spooking me, so I'm keeping my eye on that. I can't pen it, but, maybe I can barrel it, maybe I can track it, distract it, something like that. And get away with it. Again, the Stormer being really specialized just doesn't help it. It's too niche. It's too unique. Well, not unique, it's just too niche. And there you go. You can see now I'm trying to get this dart on target, and it's sort of lagging behind. It's really, really frustrating, and it's extremely hard to aim it properly, especially if you don't have a contact, or not a contact fuse, a proximity fuse. Every single SAM system in the game except the Stormer has a proxy fuse. And the Stormer is probably the worst out of them all because of that. If it had, I don't know, a better dart, if it had something to sort of give it a chance, I feel like it would be a lot more useful. I think it would just sort of not be so sucky, to be honest. It's good against helicopters, but, if the enemies are spawning just planes or a mix between planes and helicopters, you can't really win in that situation. You'd have to take out both the marksman and the Stormer at the same time. Whereas if you were in an American lineup, you could just take the ADATs, or if you were in the French lineup even, you could take the Roland. You could take anything, you name it. Any SAM system in the game, you name it, and you could probably do better against both planes and helicopters in it than the Stormer. And that's the issue I have. And the ADATs, for example, having 900 mil of pen, when you only get 50, the ADATs is probably the most well-rounded, and that's not a terrible thing. I just wish that the Stormer was less specialized, because the British lineup is extremely specialized. And when you get specialization, again, you need more crew slots. You can see there in the gameplay, we trade with the Gepard, and, nothing you can really do there. He got the drop on us, so... Now, close air support, I honestly don't think I want to cover it. The Hunter comes with 2 bomb drops, which is okay. I wish it kind of had more. It's not quite an F100 or an FJ. It's not quite a MiG-15 with the tiny Ivans. And it's not quite the Vautour with lots of snebs. Although it does get a couple of sneb pods, but they're kind of out on the middle of the wing, or on the outside of the wing, sorry. So it's extremely hard to aim, and honestly, it's probably not worth taking. You only get 2, and it's, a bit meh, to be honest. It's not really worth it. Now, our final exhibition is the Warrior. Now, for me, I think the Warrior is probably one of the best AFVs in the entire game. I would say from fighting it, the BMP probably comes in at the top, maybe the Type 89. Although the Warrior does have its specialities. It has a very high penetrating gun for what it is, and its caliber is surprisingly high. And not only that, it also gets Milan 2s, which have 700 mil of pen, which pretty much blast TOWs and ITOWs out of the sky. It has probably one of the best missiles of any AFV in the entire game. I can't think of another missile. Maybe the missile on the BMP-2, but the BMP-2 is its own sort of special breed. I think the BMP-2 is the best of all worlds and is probably the most well-rounded, but at the same time, the Warrior has its gems. It's certainly not a bad vehicle, and I kind of like it. I wish it had a bit more depth to the gameplay apart from just being a scout vehicle. I wish I could, give someone an extra crew member or something nice like that. But you know what? It's not a bad vehicle by any stretch of the imagination. A quick ATGM to the back of this Leo, and you can see the Leo's turned his turret around, and I've managed to get his gun up. Or his turret ring rather, and I managed to kill him and end the game. So, it's decent. Like you can do work with it, and it's probably the most interesting vehicle in the whole lineup. But ladies and gents, that is the British top tier lineup in a nutshell. Extremely specialized, kind of wacky, not really that great honestly, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.